the man woke up from unconsciousness, only to discover something horrifying. His severed right arm had been replaced with a zombie's limb. Panic-stricken, he insisted that the arm didn't belong to him, but the doctor didn't believe a word of it. Before he could finish arguing, the arm suddenly moved on its own. It ripped off the restraints and began lashing out at everyone around him. With just a slight shove, a police officer was sent flying across the room. Then, the man grabbed a surgical scalpel and slashed the doctor to death. This monstrous arm wasn't just unnaturally strong, it was violent and bloodthirsty. Eventually, 2 officers managed to pin the man back onto the bed, and a nurse rushed in to inject him with a sedative. Only then did he finally calm down. Meanwhile, the original owner of that arm, the recently resurrected Nazi zombie commander, was on the hunt for a new replacement. A zombie doctor carefully brought a freshly severed human arm close to the commander's shoulder, and that's when the real horror began. As black smoke rose from the wound, flesh and bone started to merge together in a grotesque fusion, seamlessly attaching the arm to his body. The commander immediately stood up and clenched his fist to test the new arm. Once he realized it moved perfectly, he wasted no time. He headed straight to his cemetery, ready to resurrect the fallen soldiers from World War II to complete the mission they never finished in life. With a determined roar, he slammed his fist into the ground. Blinding white light burst out in all directions. But after several seconds, nothing happened. The graveyard remained eerily silent. A zombie doctor quickly dug up a decayed arm from one of the graves and explained. The resurrection had failed because the bodies were too far gone, completely decomposed. Hearing this, the commander shifted his focus to the living. At that moment, a priest inside a nearby church was getting ready to head home, when a dark figure suddenly blocked his path. By the time he got a good look at the face, it was already too late to run. As you might expect, the priest didn't stand a chance. The zombie commander simply placed his left hand gently over the man's face. And just like that, the once dead priest was brought back to life. Only now, he was no longer himself. He had become a loyal, mindless zombie soldier under the commander's full control. Meanwhile, back in the hospital room, the man on the bed suddenly jolted awake. Through that zombie arm, he had seen everything that just happened. Martin struggled to get up and leave, but quickly realized he was still strapped tightly to the bed. Desperate, he started yelling at the top of his lungs, warning everyone that a zombie army was on the way, but no one could hear him. Just as he was losing hope, a young boy suddenly popped out from under the bed. Curious about Martin's zombie arm, the kid had snuck in while the guards weren't looking and even snapped a few photos to send to the local zombie hunting crew, known as the Zombie Squad. The moment Martin heard that such a team existed, he urged the boy to call them right away. With a little extra motivation, he promised the kid some chocolate if he helped untie him. The boy believed him. He quickly undid the straps, setting Martin free. But instead of chocolate, the kid got launched straight out the window. Martin's arm had lost control again, hurling the boy through the glass in a single violent motion. When Martin snapped out of it and looked over, he saw a massive hole where the window used to be. Panicked, he rushed outside, only to find the boy unconscious on the ground. Thinking there was still a chance to save him, Martin immediately started performing CPR. But he barely applied any pressure when, crack, the kid's body crumbled like tofu under his hands. Clearly, Martin had zero control over the monstrous strength of his zombie arm. And just his luck, everything that just happened was witnessed by a cop who'd rushed over after hearing the noise. There was no way to explain himself, so Martin grabbed the boy's phone and bolted. The officer took off after him without hesitation. But Martin's zombie arm freaked out again. He ripped the emblem off a nearby Mercedes and hurled it backward with terrifying force. Bullseye, right between the cop's eyes. This unintentional act left Martin deeply distressed. Just then, another officer arrived on the scene. Not wanting to hurt anyone else, Martin smashed the window of a parked car, hotwired it with the ease of a seasoned thief, and slammed the pedal to the floor. As he raced down the street, the boy's phone suddenly lit up and started ringing. Martin answered, only to hear a voice on the other end. It was the Zombie Squad, just like the kid had mentioned. They were asking where the boy was. Thinking fast, Martin lied. He told them the kid had already been eaten by a zombie, and that he himself had been bitten. But that wasn't even the worst part. An entire army of undead Nazi soldiers was preparing to unleash hell on humanity. Martin clung to the call like a drowning man to a lifeline, desperately begging the Zombie Squad to come help him ASAP. What he didn't know was that this so-called elite team of zombie hunters, yeah, they were just 3 nerdy dudes obsessed with zombie movies. Sure, they believed in zombies with all their hearts, but when it came to actual skills or gear, they were totally unprepared. Their idea of combat readiness, flying all the way from the US to Norway, and making a pit stop at the supermarket for weapons. Their entire arsenal? A hammer, a pair of scissors, and a shovel. Still, once they'd gathered their random tools, they hit the road, determined to link up with Martin. Meanwhile, Martin had made his way to a local World War II museum, hoping to uncover the true purpose behind the Nazi zombie invasion. But fate had other plans. One of the employees, Monica, was reading a newspaper, and right there on the front page was Martin's wanted poster. Recognizing him instantly, she screamed for help. Martin had no time to explain. In a panic, he grabbed her and forced her to give him a crash course on World War II history. Upstairs, Monica pointed out a photo. On the right side of the image, the very same zombie commander. Turns out, back in World War II, that man was a naval officer sent by Hitler himself to Norway's northern coast. His mission? Protect a secret warship hidden in one of the fjords. But the British caught wind of the operation and sent in bombers to sink the vessel. To vent his fury, Hitler had ordered the officer to kill all the residents of a nearby town. However, the townspeople fiercely resisted, causing the officer to suffer a crushing defeat. With only a few surviving soldiers, he fled into the snow-covered mountains, where he eventually perished due to the harsh conditions. Now, that very officer and his troops had returned, reanimated as zombies. Their mission? To finish what they started, the massacre that was never completed in life. Thanks to the museum's map, Martin discovered the zombies' next target, a small town called Vic. The museum just so happened to lie directly in their path. If his hunch was right, the zombie horde was sure to pass through here. No sooner had Martin finished his thought than a noise came from outside. He and Monica rushed to the window, and sure enough, the undead army was upon them. The zombies were mercilessly attacking innocent tourists, and the air was filled with screams. But these zombies weren't interested in eating people. No, they had turned into mindless killing machines. The methods they used were grotesquely inventive. In one bizarre moment, two zombies, seemingly without a care, used a tourist's intestines as a makeshift fuel hose to pump gasoline from a bus into a tank. Seeing this unfold, both Martin and Monica widened their eyes in disbelief. Within moments, nearly all the tourists had been slaughtered, but the nightmare didn't stop there. To their shock, the colonel began resurrecting some of the corpses right on the spot, turning them into zombies who, in turn, joined the massacre without hesitation. As the horde began moving toward the museum, Monica was shaking uncontrollably, practically on the verge of a breakdown. Martin, on the other hand, remained surprisingly calm. He quickly came up with a plan. They would disguise themselves as wax figures of German soldiers. Moments later, the zombies stormed into the museum. They tore through the exhibits, smashing displays and reclaiming weapons that had once been theirs. The colonel marched straight through the hall, paying no attention to the statues on either side of him. Both Martin and Monica were drenched in sweat, their eyes locked on every movement the undead made, afraid that the tiniest twitch might give them away. At first, it seemed like the disguise might actually work, until one of the zombie soldiers walked in a little too close. Martin froze, holding his breath, paralyzed with fear. Monica was so tense, she looked like she was about to pass out. Fortunately, thanks to their outstanding acting, Martin and Monica managed to pass the test and deceive the zombies. The colonel punched through the glass in front of him, grabbed the map, and turned to leave the museum. Once the zombies had moved far enough away, the two of them finally let out a sigh of relief. When they stepped outside, the zombie horde had already vanished, leaving behind a gruesome scene. Bodies scattered all over the place. A few straggling zombies remained, and as soon as they saw living humans, they immediately lunged toward them. But Martin didn't panic at all. It was the perfect opportunity to test the true power of his mighty arm. As he expected, with just a small amount of force, the zombie was sent flying, and with another swift punch, Martin cleanly smashed the zombie's skull. At that moment, he had fully mastered the power of the mighty arm. The few remaining zombies were easily dispatched by him. But as he looked at the tourists lying dead in pools of blood, eyes wide open in eternal terror, a deep sadness washed over him. He had only wanted to give them peace, to help them close their eyes forever. Instead, he had accidentally triggered another deadly skill of his arm. With a violent twitching of the body, one of the corpses on the ground slowly began to move. It had revived. Clearly, Martin now possessed the same ability as the colonel. What was even more surprising was that the zombie he revived didn't attack either of them. This discovery left both Martin and Monica dumbfounded. Instinctively, Martin threw a punch, knocking the zombie back down. Realizing this was another power of his mighty arm, Martin placed his palm on the corpse's face once more. And sure enough, the body revived once more. Before they could fully process this, a flying axe suddenly whizzed through the air, decapitating the revived zombie in an instant. The attackers were none other than the zombie squad. This was also the first time they had seen real zombies in person. The leader, Daniel, was thrilled, immediately squatting next to the decapitated body and pulling out his phone for a selfie with the dead creature. His naive, never-seen-before expression made Martin pause and wonder. Were these people truly the professional zombie hunting squad he had been desperately waiting for? Though Martin felt a bit disappointed, the situation was dire, and having 3 extra helpers was better than going it alone. He immediately demonstrated his ability to revive zombies in front of the squad. After seeing this, Daniel quickly had an idea for countering the German military zombies. Since Martin could resurrect the dead, why not emulate the Germans and create their own zombie army? On the way over, Daniel had researched extensively about the German military, particularly the naval officer. This officer had captured and cruelly massacred a group of Soviet soldiers during the war, with their bodies buried in a nearby snow-covered mountain. Due to the permafrost, their remains had been preserved perfectly. If Martin could revive these vengeful dead Soviet soldiers, they could build a formidable counterattack force, a Soviet undead legion to fight against the German zombie army. Time was of the essence, and the group quickly set to work. To minimize further civilian casualties, they decided to split into 2 teams. Martin and Daniel would lead the zombie squad to revive the bodies, while the 3 women would work on stalling the advance of the German zombie army. At that moment, the zombie army, now driving Tiger tanks, was marching toward the next village. As the tanks got closer, the 3 boys froze, unable to react in time, and were crushed into pieces by the tank's unstoppable advance. In a nearby house, a loving couple was busy in the bathroom when suddenly, the door was smashed open. Several soldiers stormed in, using tools to smash the couple to pieces. One woman was even thrown out of the window and crushed into a pancake by a Tiger tank. Some people realized the danger and tried to escape, but after just a few steps, they were targeted by the tank and gunned down in an instant. Soon, the entire village was slaughtered in a brutal and bloody massacre. When the 3 arrived at the scene, the zombie army had already moved on to their next target. Their numbers had grown, clearly because the officer had revived more bodies. Faced with this growing threat, the 3 knew they had to act immediately. After a quick discussion, they decided to use Monica as bait to distract the zombies, while the other 2 hid and launched a surprise attack, doing whatever they could to delay the advance. Although Monica was terrified, the thought of her boyfriend being in the next village gave her the courage to step forward without hesitation. She walked boldly toward the zombie army. The officer, noticing her, immediately ordered his soldiers to stop, intending to personally confront whoever dared to block his path. He could never tolerate such an insult, and seeing Monica attempt to flee, he swiftly ordered half of his army to chase after her. Terrified, Monica ran for her life, but fortunately, the marshy ground slowed down the zombies' pursuit. Seeing the moment was right, the 2 quickly lit the pre-made bombs and hurled them toward the zombies. The burning fuses immediately drew the zombies' attention, and the 2 continued to throw more explosives, taking out wave after wave of the undead. Before long, they had wiped out all the pursuing zombies. However, the 3 hadn't even had time to celebrate when they saw a Tiger tank lock onto them. Realizing the danger, they quickly turned and ran. Explosions erupted around them, and they were instantly engulfed in thick smoke. The officer, using his binoculars to survey the situation, saw no sign of the 3 and assumed they had been blown to bits. Believing they were dead, he changed direction and ordered his forces to move forward. At this moment, Martin was still desperately rushing toward his destination. Unexpectedly, one of the zombie minions suddenly became unwell. It had motion sickness and started vomiting all over the car. To make matters worse, it ate its own vomit, and the 2 of them had to endure the disgusting scene all the way. By nightfall, they finally reached their destination, where the bodies of Soviet soldiers were buried in the land before them. However, Martin had no idea how to proceed. If he had to dig up the bodies one by one, it would surely take him at least 10 to 15 days. Just as he was feeling helpless, his arms suddenly clenched into a fist without him even realizing it. In that moment, Martin understood what he had to do. Without hesitation, he slammed his fist into the ground. A flash of lightning-like energy spread, and the earth trembled. Then, soldiers who had been dead for decades emerged from the ground, now transformed into bloodthirsty zombies. Seeing this terrifying scene, the zombie minion was petrified with fear, huddling close to Daniel for comfort. The final appearance of a zombie officer was even more imposing. It walked straight up to Martin, demonstrating its loyalty. Like the undead army led by the German officer, It completely obeyed Martin's every command. The next day, after passing through several villages, the German undead army finally arrived at their ultimate target, Vic Town. However, as they entered the town, ready to wreak havoc, they were unexpectedly blocked by three figures standing in their way. Facing the zombie army, Martin confidently declared that the colonel would fail again and should just go back to the grave, since the town's residents had already been evacuated. But the colonel sneered, and his adjutant couldn't help but laugh out loud. The zombie soldiers, too, laughed uncontrollably, as if to say, "With just you three weaklings, what can you possibly change?" But Martin remained calm, revealing his right Kirin arm. The colonel's expression immediately darkened. He hadn't expected that his own arm would be in Martin's possession. Though the new arm still worked, its power was nowhere near the strength of his previous one. Martin smirked and told the colonel that the situation had changed. It was no longer just him and his men. As soon as he finished speaking, the Soviet zombie officer made his grand entrance, leading a large army of undead soldiers. Seeing that Martin had used his power to resurrect an enemy faction, the colonel's laughter immediately faded. The two enemies, now face to face, stared each other down with hatred in their eyes. With a signal from their respective leaders, the battle between the undead armies officially began. The undead soldiers, armed with various tools, charged at full force toward the enemy army. As the two sides collided, a fierce battle erupted. The zombie officer proved to be incredibly fierce, slaughtering enemy soldiers with ease as if cutting through vegetables. No zombie could stop his advance. As the fight raged on, a police car arrived late to the scene. The officers, upon seeing zombies fighting, were at a loss as to what to do. The colonel, realizing that the situation was escalating quickly, gave the order for a Tiger tank to take out the police car, while he personally faced off against the zombie officer. The two leaders immediately threw punches at each other, neither gaining the upper hand. Their combat abilities were evenly matched, but because the colonel wasn't in his full form, after several rounds, it became clear that he was starting to struggle. Meanwhile, the police, still unaware of the full scale of the situation, were caught off guard as the Tiger tank charged at them. Quick-thinking officers managed to leap out of the vehicle in time, narrowly avoiding death, but those who were slower were crushed into pulp by the tank's relentless advance. The few surviving officers, now terrified out of their minds, scrambled to find safety and continued to watch the chaos unfold. This truly was a world-changing battle. The zombies were charging forward on the battlefield, with the colonel's doctor not idle either. One soldier, who had already lost his combat effectiveness, was quickly patched up by the doctor, who used straw to replace damaged organs, and within moments, the soldier was back in the fight. As for the soldier who had lost his right leg, the doctor came up with an even more inventive solution, replacing the prosthetic limb with a toilet plunger. The surgery was rough and straightforward, but incredibly effective. Meanwhile, Daniel was swinging his hammer wildly, turning what were otherwise simple tools into weapons of mass destruction. The rest of the team had also joined the battlefield, having survived the tank's bombardment. However, due to the overwhelming number of enemies, Martin's side began to lose ground. It seemed they had arrived just in time. But when it came to the duel between the two leaders, Martin's side seemed to have the upper hand. The zombie officer had managed to knock down the colonel, but just as he raised his weapon to finish him off, a zombie soldier suddenly launched a surprise attack from behind. Martin and the others watched helplessly as the colonel got back up, grabbed a weapon, and eliminated the officer. With the loss of one of their key leaders, the enemy forces were thrown into disarray. Despite this, one of the girls realized something crucial. The colonel and his soldiers appeared to have some kind of connection. If they could take down the colonel, perhaps the rest of his army would fall with him. Determined, Martin charged forward with a ferocious roar. Although Martin's strength was enhanced by his mighty Qilin arm, his physical body was still human, and he was no match for the colonel. After only a few rounds, he was forced to retreat. At the critical moment, Daniel managed to infiltrate the Tiger tank, neutralizing the driver inside. The now out-of-control tank sped toward them, unintentionally saving Martin's life. The two continued their final battle atop the tank. Taking advantage of the chaos, Martin suppressed the colonel, while the tank slowly moved out of the battlefield. Seeing this, Daniel slammed on the brakes, sending Martin flying off the tank. The colonel, however, remained unaffected. At this point, Martin's stamina had been depleted, and the zombie squad found themselves cornered. The colonel was preparing to finish the fight once and for all, unaware that the tank was targeting him from behind. As expected, the colonel fell, and with him, his soldiers collapsed as if they had lost all connectivity, one by one. Against all odds, they emerged victorious in this final battle. This unexpected turn of events led Martin to look at the zombie squad in a new light. After the crisis was over, the group parted ways. Once everything calmed down, the police finally emerged to clean up the mess, while Martin, in his usual carefree manner, drove off. However, he had one important mission left to accomplish, using the power of his Qilin arm to resurrect his deceased girlfriend. As the car rocked back and forth with a rhythmic motion, one couldn't help but think, now this is true love.